Everyone, I'm Dean Obeidallah. Let's talk Tesla. More specifically, let's talk the Tesla protests. First of all, with few exceptions, they're all peaceful. But there's been some acts of vandalism that has happened here and there. And what's resulted is we've seen the Trump regime go berserk, ballistic. You had Donald Trump call them domestic terrorists. You had Pam Bondi, the AG, say we're going to put these people in prison for long periods of time. You had Kash Patel, the FBI director, actually create a task force to investigate people in these isolated acts of vandalism. Now, of course, Donald Trump now calls the Tesla attackers of cars terrorists. What does he call the January 6th terrorists? He calls them patriots. Here's the thing. Let's just assume for a second that the Tesla acts of vandalism are actually caused by people angry with Elon Musk and his gutting of programs and Trump's gutting of programs like Medicaid and Social Security and Medicare and the VA. Just assume that's what's going on. It's on a false flag. Here's the thing. The chickens have come home to roost. That's right. The chickens have come home to roost. There is only one person to blame for any acts of vandalism or even violence at Tesla dealerships, and that person is Donald J. Trump. The reality is we've seen Donald Trump wield violence as a political weapon unlike any president ever. In none in our lifetimes, if ever in the history of the United States, has an American president normalized and wielded the use of violence to help him achieve political goals like Donald Trump. And it didn't just start on January 6th. Let's take a step back. During his 2016 campaign, we all remember Trump saying things like, if you see someone getting ready to throw a tomato, punch him in the face. And then he vowed, I'll pay your legal fees. There was Donald Trump over and over telling his crowd that violence on his behalf was acceptable, my friends. And as president, he defended violence by his supporters, such as in Portland, against the anti-Trump protesters that are out there. And then, of course, that brings us to January 6th, which DOJ and FBI at the time call an act of domestic terrorism. That act of domestic terrorism was because of one person, Donald Trump. As the January 6th report notes, the central cause of the January 6th attack was Donald Trump, whom many others follow. Quote, none of the events of January 6th would have happened without him. That is right from the January 6th report. We know that. We lived through it. We saw Donald Trump, as part of his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, call his supporters to Washington, promising them what? A wild time. And then he gave them a speech. He knew they were angry. He knew where they're armed. And he told them things like, we're going down to the Capitol and we're not going to let them take our country away from us. And he said fight or fighting 20 times. He said peaceful one time because that was the teleprompter, but he said fight or fighting over 20 times there. He knew what he was doing. He told them go to the Capitol and stop the steal, and they attacked the Capitol. And they attacked more specifically police officers. As the U.S. Attorney Matthew Graves said in 2024, the attack on the Capitol and the police officers was, quote, likely the largest single-day mass assault of law enforcement officers in our nation's history. And how did Trump respond? First of all, he didn't call the attack off for 3 hours. But secondly, afterwards, he's called the terrorists who attacked our Capitol, quote, unbelievable patriots. He's called them warriors. He's talked about how unfairly they've been treated, that they're hostages. He even raised money for them at his country club and let the families of terrorists use his country club to raise money. Beyond that, he helped record a song with the J6 choir, which is the January 6 terrorists from prison, singing the national anthem. And Star Spangled Banner, and Donald Trump was part of it. And who helped produce that recording? Kash Patel, the current FBI director. Yeah, the same guy who started a task force now to go after Tesla protesters, called the January 6 terrorists. He called them, quote, political prisoners, and celebrated the January 6 terrorists. Now, and to make it worse, if it's even possible, Donald Trump demonized the FBI, law enforcement, judges, or anyone trying to hold them accountable. And then the first day in office, what did Trump do? He did exactly what he vowed. He pardoned the January 6 terrorists. Now he's even talked about giving them compensation for being treated unfairly. Taking a step back, what Donald Trump did was incite a terrorist attack on our Capitol. And from there, praise the terrorists who are helping him try to achieve his political goal of overturning an election, and then went on to raise money for them and then pardon them. The message sent was very clear. Authoritarian experts like Ruth Ben-Ghiat, that I interviewed, talked about this before the pardoning, saying if he were to pardon people, it incentivizes more violence. The fact he was never held accountable incentivizes more violence. But when I talked to Ruth, the focus was really, to be blunt, on MAGA supporters. That they would see Donald Trump as giving them a message. If you commit violence on my behalf, I got your back. So don't worry about it. But what's happened here is Donald Trump's done something that I didn't even expect. But it makes sense from a common sense point of view. By Donald Trump normalizing political violence, it's infected everybody, not just MAGA, but the entire nation. And we've seen the other side now use violence and not be held accountable and be praised by the man in the White House. We saw the guy himself in the White House incite a terrorist attack and not be held accountable. The result is people being human beings that they are, like, well, if they can commit violence, why can't we? If they can vandalize the Capitol, why can't we vandalize a Tesla dealership? This is all because of Trump. And just to be clear, there is no place for political violence. We will lose our republic quicker than Trump wants it to end if political violence becomes part of the normal political discussions. Because one of the traits of fascism is the use of political violence to acquire or retain power. Or better, simply, the use of violence to achieve your political goals. We can't have that in this country. So the violence is wrong. The vandalism is wrong. It's understandable, but it's absolutely wrong. There's no defense for it. And to show you how Donald Trump is consistent, and that if you're on his side, violence is okay. But if you're on our side, and even vandalism, even a protest is wrong. On Saturday, this past Saturday, a self-professed Trump supporter drove his vehicle into a crowd of 150 people peacefully protesting in West Palm Beach, Florida, outside of a Tesla dealership. These people were mostly senior citizens. But the driver of the car, 44-year-old Andrew Tuttle, a U.S. Army retired captain, big-time Trump supporter, he drove his car into the crowd slowly, so no one got hurt, but to scare them, to intimidate him. And the good thing is, local law enforcement arrested him and charged him with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. But here's the point. You have aggravated assault with a deadly weapon by a Trump supporter against his political enemies. So you don't hear a peep this week by Donald Trump about it. You don't hear Kash Patel saying, we're going to make sure we prosecute these people. You don't hear Pam Bondi, the AG, going, this is unacceptable. No, that language is only used for those people on our side, those who support democracy and freedom and oppose fascism and autocracy. And again, no place for political violence. That's how the country we can be. But look, Donald Trump has used it as a tool. And human beings being human beings again see it. If the other side can do it, why can't we? And that is the problem of where we stand right now. So to me, there is one person responsible for any acts of vandalism or violence at Tesla dealerships as they try to achieve political goals through those acts. And that person is Donald J. Trump, because he's the one that gave us not just the January 6th attack, but going all the way back to his campaigns in 2016. Again, there's one person responsible for any acts of vandalism or violence at Tesla dealerships, and that person is convicted felon Donald J. Trump, who should be in a prison cell right now, not in the White House. Thanks for tuning in.